What's up everyone, and welcome back to the MMA Zone. Today, let's get started with Jan Blachowicz entertaining the thought of a rematch against Israel Adesanya. Back in March of 2021, then light heavyweight champion Jan Blachowicz made his first title defense against the middleweight champion Israel Adesanya, who was looking to become a champ with a win at UFC 259. Ultimately, Jan won that fight via unanimous decision after a dominant performance in the grappling department. Now, over a year after that fight, he appeared on the MMA Hour, and in discussing Israel Adesanya's latest defense of his title against Jared Cannonier at UFC 276, Blachowicz spoke a bit about what might have led to the way things worked out. Criticism came from all sides concerning Adesanya's performance, with some calling it a snooze fest and attacking the champion for not going in for the kill. Blachowicz, while he did state that he didn't think the fight was boring, he thought it was a pretty good fight, he did admit that last year's confrontation might have something to do with this. Ariel Helwani pushed him on this, and then he eventually asked him maybe they should do a rematch. To that, this is what Blachowicz said.
So maybe I have to cut the weight and give him rematch in his category. If I have a chance, why not? Is it easy for his belt, for fight for the belt? I can try.
Blachowicz goes on to admit that him cutting down to 185 pounds would be really tough, but if he starts now, he can do so by the end of the year. Blachowicz, one could assume, is half joking here, given his frustrations over the fact that he's gonna have to wait a bit until he gets another crack at the light heavyweight title. Blachowicz was thought to be challenging Jiri Prochazka next for the belt, but Jiri recently stated his intent to fight Glover Teixeira in a rematch of their epic UFC 275 clash, saying he wanted to leave no doubt about his performance and simply do better against the Brazilian. Still, what do you make of Blachowicz's comments concerning Israel Adesanya? Belal Muhammad believes he could spoil the matchup between Kamaru Usman versus Khamzat Chimaev. Do you think Belal Muhammad is actually a really bad style matchup for some of the top welterweights in the promotion? He's going off on Twitter about his thoughts on what the UFC does and doesn't want to do. This is what he stated: "I'm the worst style matchup for Khamzat and Usman, and the UFC knows that. Them two are obviously the biggest money fights together, so they couldn't risk me beating either one yet. But soon, I'll be undeniable." Belal is ranked number 5 in the welterweight division, and he's on a 7-fight win streak with wins over big names like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Damian Maia, and Vicente Luque. He's also taken on number 1 contender Leon Edwards, though that fight ended in a no contest due to eye pokes. Khamzat has been rising up the ranks since he entered the promotion in mid-2020, fighting twice in 10 days. Knocking out other fighters with his first punch, and even going the distance, winning by unanimous decision against top welterweight Gilbert Burns earlier this year. It's safe to say that Khamzat has taken the UFC by storm, and he remains undefeated, all but one of his fights ending in a knockout. At the same time, Usman has yet to lose a fight since 2013, and he's never dropped a bout in the octagon. He has 5 successful welterweight title defenses and has looked so good that UFC president Dana White stated he considers Usman the greatest welterweight of all time, above former longtime champion GSP. Chimaev is still on the sidelines waiting for his next matchup, while Usman is set to defend his title against Edwards at UFC 278 in August. Muhammad, who has been on quite a nice run for the last few years, believes he's closer to a title shot than some might believe, and has also had words with Khamzat online about fighting each other next. Still, what do you think about Belal Muhammad's claims here? Kamaru Usman should forget about light heavyweight, says Big John McCarthy. Welterweight champion Kamaru Usman has looked so dominant in his run as UFC champion that he's eyeing up a move to become a champ at a heavier weight division. He's the champion at 170 pounds at the moment, and he wants to skip moving up to challenge for the 185-pound title since he's friends with Israel Adesanya, and is instead looking to challenge for the 205-pound belt, a whopping 35 pounds heavier. Usman is 15-0 in the UFC and will be taking on Leon Edwards on August 20th at UFC 278 in the rematch of their 2015 clash. But after this, Usman says he wants to lay claim to the title of number 1 pound-for-pound fighter on the planet and take on whomever is the light heavyweight champion whenever he steps in the octagon. After Edwards, assuming he's still welterweight champion, of course. Big John McCarthy is not a fan of this idea, and he stated as much in a recent episode of his Weighing In podcast alongside Josh Thompson. This is what Big John stated about Usman moving up to light heavyweight.
But he's a phenomenal MMA fighter, and at 170, Dude, he's the king. Stay the king. Don't go up that far. Josh, we're talking about 35 pounds of weight class. 35. Crazy. Don't do it.
At the moment, Jiri Prochazka is the light heavyweight champion and looking to rematch Glover Teixeira perhaps later this year. If that happens and Usman beats Edwards and the UFC agrees to have him move up to 205, then perhaps Usman would be facing either of those two men at some point next year. And don't forget, Usman also wants to face prolific boxing world champion Canelo Alvarez as well, so he's not shy about letting it be known what his intentions are. But what do you think about Big John's comments here concerning Usman? Do you think he's too small for 205? Don't forget to take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the MMA Zone to stay up to date on all the latest fight news. Michael Bisping says Jon Jones is hyping up Stipe Miocic for the money, baby. Former middleweight champion turned MMA pundit Michael Bisping knows a thing or two about the business side of MMA and how to sell a fight. In his day, Bisping was a great trash talker and promoted the hell out of his fights, generating interest in both his opponent and himself, which helped add more zeros to his fight purse as time has gone on. So that's why, in the recent video on his YouTube channel, he states that this is what Jon Jones is doing for any potential matchup against Stipe Miocic. Jones is gearing up to finally make his UFC heavyweight debut, after being on the sidelines for coming up on 2.5 years now. February 2020 was his last fight, a unanimous decision win over Dominic Reyes to defend his light heavyweight belt. He vacated that title a few months later to move up to heavyweight, and while a rumored clash against Francis Ngannou was expected last year, that never came to fruition for a variety of reasons. Now, with Ngannou out for likely the rest of the year due to a knee injury, the UFC is eyeing up a matchup between Bones and Stipe, the former heavyweight champion and the longest reigning one at that. This is what Bisping had to say about Jones' comments regarding Stipe.
You know, you don't want to say, oh, I wanted to fight Ngannou, but he wasn't available, so I'm fighting this guy. No, you make it sound like that's the top guy. You make it sound like that's the tougher challenge. You make it sound like you want to go out there and have the toughest fight possible. And that's what he's doing here.
It's not clear when the UFC will set this fight up, although previous reports indicated that Stipe was looking to fight around October or so. What do you think about Bisping's comments here? Do you agree with him? Robert Whittaker admits he's a bit shocked at Alex Pereira's quick rise in the UFC. It only took Alex Pereira 3 fights in the promotion to get a shot at the undisputed UFC middleweight title. While Pereira is no doubt an amazing talent and a striking wizard, part of the reason he's been able to rise so quickly is due to the UFC themselves. The organization knows they can promote the heck out of the matchup between Pereira and 185-pound champion Israel Adesanya, whom Pereira knocked out in kickboxing back in 2017. Pereira's tenure with the organization started with a bang as he knocked out Andreas Michailidis with a flying knee last November. Michailidis is no longer with the promotion. Next up, Pereira was tested against Bruno Silva earlier this year, and he walked away with a unanimous decision win after 3 rounds. And about 2 weeks ago, he knocked out top 10 middleweight Sean Strickland with a strong left hook in the first round. Needless to say, Pereira's meteoric rise has been swift. Former middleweight champion Robert Whittaker shared how surprised he was at this during a recent interview on Submission Radio. This is what Bobby Knuckles had to say.
The surprise comes from how fast Pereira's just skyrocketed through the ranks to get that title shot. But really, I think it's a good fight that's good fight to match up. You know, 2 tall dudes, striking, been there before. I think it'll be fun.
Whittaker went on to say that, yes, the UFC has been able to match Pereira up well for his first few fights in the promotion, to set up such a massive and intriguing showdown against his former kickboxing nemesis in Adesanya. Whittaker also stated that, even though he doesn't really care who wins, he'd like Pereira to win this fight, if only because it would make his route to another title shot easier. Whittaker has already lost twice to Adesanya, including his last fight out back in February. He will now try to get back on track as he takes on Marvin Vettori, another former title challenger, in the main event of the UFC Paris card on September 3rd. What do you think about Whittaker's comments here? Thank you so much for joining us today. What do you make of what's going on in the fight world? Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all the latest news from the MMA Zone. See you next time.